Hello everybody and welcome along to the Rangers Review Saturday show. It's the usual segment of the week where we talk tactics, and it's certainly a big weekend this weekend. The first of two Old Firm games, the first one in the league of course, which could make or break either Rangers or Celtic's title chances. And given it's such a big game, we thought we'd get the full squad involved. Here I'm joined by Adam Thornton. Adam, how are you?
Good, yeah, looking forward to getting into it. It's, I think every week is a big week for Rangers, but this one feels just a little bit bigger.
Absolutely. And of course, the regular tactics man himself, Josh Barry. Josh, how are you getting on?
Not got my laptop, so saying to you before I came on, I feel like a performer on stage without his guitar. So I don't know what to do with my hands, Blair. But yeah, apart from that, I'm fine.
All up here, all in the dome
all
piece.
up here,
Yeah, right.
This is a real test to see if I can actually remember some of the stuff instead of reading it. But yeah, I think we should be banned from saying it's a big game because we have said that
It's a big 3 points.
it's a big 3 points. But listen, it is. So yeah, let's see how it goes.
Just another 3 points. Just another game. That's all it is. But it's certainly much more than that. Let's not try and pretend it's not much more than that. We'll start off by let's talking a little bit about what the kids call the vibes, what the kids call the energy round about this game.
Shall we leave now?
And how everyone is feeling going into this game. Obviously, we had Hearts a couple of weeks ago, that 4-2 at Ibrox on the Sunday. Ibrox was electric that day. It really set everybody on that mood, and I think there was a general feeling, more so than any other point this season, that Rangers fans were thinking, okay, we might actually be able to do something special this week. But that draw at Livingston, it maybe kind of let Hearts off the ropes a little bit. They had them on the canvas, but they've got back up, and now they look in a bit of a strong position again. But this game on Sunday, it feels like Rangers could land a serious blow to Celtic's title ambitions, but also put a marker down to Hearts to go, we're very much in this.
I'll take it. Yes. I think, Blair, the Hearts game, we've spoken about it quite a lot since. The Hearts game was one of the first games where I thought you saw Danny Rohl's team really set the tempo and bend the game to their will, not to be too cliche about it. But they've got back into title race with his smart decisions, with clean sheets, with being a bit conservative. And then they've had to kind of transition and add layers during the season. The January signings have helped. We've spoken a lot about physicality and set pieces. We've spoken about it being very sensible. The Livingston game, again, as we discussed at length, is a blow, but I think it is down to bad luck instead of, if you look at the chances that Rangers created, we'll maybe throw the race chart up here. Nearly 3 expected goals. They should have won. They didn't. You can carry that in a 38-game season. I don't think that game's on Danny Rohl. I just think it's the ebbs and flows of football. And when you start 13 points behind, you don't really have the space to carry it. There's a little bit of an unknown for me with this Old Firm game because generally Celtic have been the team who's played in the more proactive manner and Rangers the more reactive manner, certainly in terms of ball possession in these games. Martin O'Neill's changed that a bit. Celtic, I've obviously had a couple of, the first leg of the Stuttgart game in particular, where they've had a bit of a bad run of form and then lost at Hibs as well. Could they change to a back three? Maybe. How does it impact what Rangers want to do? But what I'd quite like to see, Blair, is that Rangers go, as we'll come on to discuss, with 2 strikers. Like against Hearts, they kind of set the tempo of the game and win it that way, because I think that's actually their best chance of winning the game, whereas in the past, if you look at what Danny Rohl did at Parkhead a few months ago, if you look even the wins under Philippe Clement and Barry Ferguson last year, it was more about reacting to what Celtic do. I think I'd like to see it the other way around this time.
Adam, before we get into the minutiae of the tactics of this game and how we think that Danny Rohl and, of course, Martin O'Neill might set up in what I think will be a very interesting battle on the sidelines, do you feel as though there is a confidence from the Rangers support because of the say, weakened nature of Celtic currently? And although there is that game against Livingston, but we spoke about it, that Rangers on another day win that game, there is still this optimism that Rangers can go and really bury Celtic tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm certainly positive about that. I think most of the fan base will be aware that Celtic have dipped off quite considerably. They've had as rocky a season as Rangers have had. Whether or not that really matters come the minutiae of the game, like you said, I'm not too sure. I think you still tend to carry previous mistakes and previous losses into these games anyway. It's just human nature. I think you do. So without saying the scar tissue word that I've just said, I think there probably will be elements of that in there. For myself, though, I have to say I slightly disagree. Maybe come on to it. I slightly disagree with Josh in terms of the manager and the Hibs game, not the Livingston game. Sorry, not for the output at the end, because absolutely we should have won, but just substitutes and also team selection and things that we could maybe pick up on later. But I'm feeling very positive now. I am a notorious jinx when it comes to these type of things, as people will know. But I am feeling quite positive in the longer term thing, because I did a lot of podcasts when Stephen Gerrard was here, 2 tactics podcasts a week, pretty much for 3 or 4 years. And looking back on it, you see progressions and you see things that weren't great and really bad, poor losses, but overall things trend in a direction that you're happy with. After the 20 games under Danny Rule so far, I think it is constant progression. Things are going up the way. We might not be the form team over the last 3-5 games, but we're the form team over 10, we're the form team over 20, we're comfortably the form team over 20. All of those metrics sort of point in one way in terms of the things that Danny Rule is doing. There's been 3 phases of this season, the first 8 under Martin, then a big jump under Roll for his first 10 games, and then the thing that's given me the most comfort is there's been almost as big a jump again in his last 10 games in terms of creating open play, set pieces, conceding chances, shots, all that sort of stuff. So those are the things in my head, if we're taking a longer term view of it, that I'm feeling quite positive about. Whether that translates to me feeling really positive on Sunday lunchtime, I'm not sure, but I think there certainly is there's reason to be optimistic for sure.
You spoke about things trending in a positive direction there. Was there an overreaction to Sunday?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think so for sure.
Like, tell us what you tell us what you think Rowe got wrong. I think we should get into that before we go on to the Celtic game.
It's the conservatism, I think, for me in those 3 away games. Yes, there's reasons for it, for sure. You think about the Hibs game. The Motherwell game. Sorry, there was a bit of dubiety about whether players were injured or that was the team we're going with, and you've got Hearts at the weekend.
Yeah, there was a lot of shock that Ryan Nadiri wasn't in the starting 11 that night, and I think Rule's probably been a little bit burned by that, and now he's very cautious about telling us who's going to be
to the point
coming
where,
in. And
where it's like there's a vacuum and people just fill it with words. So I didn't think it was as bad. Obviously, it wasn't as bad there, but yeah, I just think if we've seen such a big statement with the goal scored the second half against Kilmarnock, Queen's Park, Hearts, with the 2 strikers, with the 2 10s and the 2 centre mids, to switch away from that at the weekend and by the table should be the easiest game of the season. To go a little bit more cautious without playing 2 strikers, it just didn't sit with me. It would have been, as Josh said earlier on, let's put another statement down and say, okay, we've done that game, we've hit that high, let's go again, particularly because we've got these games. I felt it was just a little bit conservative is the wrong word, but I struggle with some of those players and the roles that they were given. Gassama, I think everybody is probably of the opinion is an absolute impact player. His ability in domestic games to influence games from the start is quite limited. And then obviously he moved over to the right as well, which I think most people, even more people, will agree probably isn't best suited to him. I think if we've learned anything about Yusuf Chermiti, and I'm not sure Yusuf Chermiti is a player you're ever going to ever learn everything about, but if we've learned anything about him over the last 3 weeks, it's give him a partner and you will see an entirely different proposition. So those are maybe my 2 queries. I understand Nadiri wasn't fit to play. I understand some of the options are slightly more limited, but it was maybe just a bit unnecessarily cautious, or it felt unnecessarily cautious. That being said, as Josh said, plenty of chances falling in the box to players, and that they should bury great goalkeeping. Just a bizarre game in that respect. I think you said we should have won at 92%.
Yeah, because I was going to say, you say cautious, but the numbers that you've been touting around this week suggest that touting around, yes, that's how I'm now
roaming around the office talking about race,
shouting to anyone who will listen to you about how many goals Rangers should have scored on Sunday. But the way that you've framed this to me is that even though they may have not played with 2 strikers, which could be perceived as being more cautious, Rangers actually created more chances than usual.
Yeah, I think in terms of their performance, I think it was one of their best under Danny Rule away from home. And you look at, sounds like we're here to make excuses, but I think it's just instead that you try and analyse the performance rather than the result. So you have, what was it, 2.84, something like that, expected goals. Jerome Pryor has a game where I think he saves 1.5 goals above average. You have the late Mikey Moore decision. You have the errors from John Souttar, whether that's a plastic pitch or not, the errors. You have the quality of the strikes from Livingston. You have Rangers conceding twice from set pieces, which they haven't been as strong as they have offensively from set pieces, but I don't think they've conceded two pieces in the set pieces in the game under Danny Rule. Correct me if I'm wrong. I just think we put all those factors together. It was literally just one of those days.
Just one of those days.
Yeah. Why didn't he go 4-2-2-2? Why has he not played Chermiti and Miovski together so far? Because he obviously doesn't think they're a pair that complement one another. Now, he changes that at half time. Is that due to a Skov Olsen injury? Perhaps, but then maybe the nature of the game changes because you're a goal down. So I would have, as we're going to come on to talk about Blair, I would like to see Rangers play with that two-striker formation as much as possible at the moment because it looks so exciting against Hearts. I just think that a lot of there's so much frustration around the Livingston game. I'd like to see Nadim Barami come on earlier for instead of Tello Asgard maybe because I thought he made a really good impact. However, I think the late Mikey Moore decision kind of just typifies a day that Danny Rule's probably sitting back reflecting on that going, do you know what? Maybe I could have done this a little bit better, this a little bit better. But over the course, I think it is about luck. And I think, as I keep going back to, you can carry that over a 38-game season. Motherwell and Hibs are slightly different. Motherwell are, I just think, a really good team. And the Hibs game was a bit of a strange game. I think they got that quite spot on tactically because they gave Rangers a lot of the ball. And on that day, I think the selection was wrong. You should have had Mikey Moore over Gassama. But yeah, I think the Livingston game, it's just unfortunate. And Rule and Rangers have to hope that now that Hearts have that 4-point margin, that slip isn't completely detrimental.
Yeah, it isn't entirely costly. Before we really go into how we think Danny Rule is going to approach this game, and we'll get on to predicted 11s as well. We know you guys love it when we predict our starting lineups and getting them horribly wrong, and then you can slate us in the comments for it. Let's have a little chat about what we think Rangers are going to be up against on Sunday. Now, as we said, this is a Celtic team that are a bit wounded at the minute. We've seen them struggle like quite a lot in the Europa League against Stuttgart. They were really outplayed defensively. They look hopeless. I think that's too much of a harsh word. They're obviously going to be missing Austin Trusty at the back, which would suggest to me maybe Dane Murray might come in, quite inexperienced centre half. You then obviously have that loss against Hibs at Celtic Park last week. They will be hurting from that, and goals they conceded were very poor goals defensively from their perspective. Adam, is Martin O'Neill going to come to Ibrox, bearing in mind the context of the league, and try and go for Rangers?
I would be surprised, I have to say. I know they're sitting third, and you might think that, and no one would admit it, but I think Celtic would see coming out of this game as with a point as being job done. Particularly, I haven't looked as far as, and I never will look as far as what Celtic fixtures are going to be post-split, but I know we're going to have a few tricky ones, so by the reverse, the things that work there, they might have a slightly easier. Doesn't work that way, we know. So I think they'll be looking at that internally and thinking, we're not in a great place. We've got some of these players injured, some missing, some coming into form. I'd be surprised if it's all-out attack, as we've seen maybe Postecoglou and Brendan Rodgers coming and trying to swamp Rangers. Similarly, I don't know, there's a couple of games that burn in my brain. One of them from a lot longer ago than I would like it to be is the 2-0 game where Stephen Gerrard played Nico Katic left centre-half and John Flanagan left back, and Celtic just adopted a kind of give them the ball and nothing's going to happen and we'll just sit and pick Rangers off, and I think we got beat 2-0. One of the goals late on. Don't know if it will quite be to that extent, but I could certainly see it being a bit more. I think this might be borrowing a comment of Josh's, but I could see them certainly being more cautious than
a Barryism, as we call it.
Proactive.
Let's not start that. I'll start to take a tremendous heat. Same question. Under Rodgers and Postecoglou, Celtic have played differently, but generally they've wanted the ball. And I've only watched a little bit of them under Martin O'Neill, but I think it's fair to say that he, as a coach, would be less centric on possession than the two men who came before him, or three if you include Nancy as well. And I think the thing with Nancy's Celtic is, in that first half of the Old Firm at the turn of the year, Rangers were battered is way too strong a word, but they were outplayed in parts. And Celtic had a load of chances aside from their goal, but Rangers couldn't really press them.
Yeah, Johnny Kenny did miss a good few chances in that fixture. Let's be fair. If he buries 2 or 3 of them, it could be a completely different complexion.
The difference is now, I think that O'Neill has probably made it less extreme at both ends, so he's not going to build up in that kind of short passing, play through the press instead of over it style that has the upside of when it works, it looks really good, but the downside of what happened in that second half. Centre half question is really interesting because I think if you're O'Neill, you probably don't want Nadiri and Chermiti up against Dane Murray and Scales. So I wouldn't be surprised if Celtic go to potentially a back three, Oxley, Chamberlain, and
Tierney is one of those centre backs.
Yeah, Tierney is one of the centre backs. I don't know if Srirachi, is it Srirachi?
Srirachi, yeah.
I don't know if he's fit, but we're obviously we're recording this just before their second leg against Stuttgart, Blair. So we'll see what happens there in terms of like what team do they put out, how does that affect their energy reserves. But I think to simplify it and boil it down to one point, I think a lot of old firms in the past, again, go back to Clement or Barry Ferguson last year, Celtic have had the stronger identity of like, this is what we want to do with the ball, this is how we want to control the game, and Rangers have kind of reacted to that. Whereas this time I feel that's up for grabs, and that's why I'd like to see Rangers approach the game as they did against Hearts, try and overpower them, try and kind of outpace them, because that's something that Celtic, we've seen them struggle with in Europe this year, and set the tempo of a game to one that suits them with the home crowd, which, you know, when Rangers beat Celtic under Clement last year, it was still about pressing and creating moments, and within those opportunities, I think there's more of an opportunity to control the narrative of this game this time around.
Yeah, and the flip side of that question is to ask you, Adam, if Martin O'Neill comes to maybe not dominate the game and maybe just try and escape with a point, try and do the proverbial job on Rangers, is that, as Josh says, the perfect opportunity for Danny Rule to actually go and make this game Rangers' own, to go and set the tone, set the tempo, and really play the game on Rangers' terms, which I think is something that's been charged at Rangers a lot over the past 4 or 5 years, that they don't dictate how the game goes. They just play the way another team wants them to play. But this seems like the perfect opportunity. Now, as we've said, Celtic are weakened, and a lot of the players in that team are Celtic players in name only, because they're wearing that shirt. I don't quite think they're up to the level of teams gone by. So this is an opportunity in the grandest of stages in an Old Firm game for Rangers to go, yeah, we're back on top now.
For sure. And it's ironic because we probably won the game in New Year by going to a slightly more cautious approach, if you like, bringing in the back three to really help us. And that's where I think no two games are the same as far as Old Firm anyway, but certainly as far as tactics, just because one thing worked for you 6 weeks ago doesn't mean it's going to work for you now, which is fascinating. So yeah, I think for sure when you tie it all together, all the circumstances of both teams, where the title race is, where the literal game is being played, I think Rangers need to treat it like the Hearts game, and they need to come out and get that pressing on point. I think that's where the two strikers that Josh mentioned, I think, will be huge for us, because if Celtic do go with a back three, it's not going to be Martin O'Neill's back three that he had 25 years ago.
Yeah.
In terms of what they have, there's a case that those three players may be better than now than the three
they've currently got to pick from.
But yeah. So if they do that, I think that probably plays into Rangers' hands as well, because we've seen the sort of philosophy, certainly with the 2-10s and even with two Romans and whichever right fullback, which I'm sure we'll come on to play. We've seen us being able to really attack that last line and overwhelm and try and get that domination, whether it is against 3 defenders or 4 defenders. So either way, I think it shouldn't really change what I expect Rangers to do. But absolutely be on the front foot for sure.
Just the quick flip side as well as the Hearts game. What is important, and Derek McKinnon spoke about this after, before Rangers equalise, Hearts have a brilliant opportunity to transition up the pitch and could well have scored a second goal. And Rangers are. I think under Rule they've had some good build-up options, and they're an unpredictable side, which I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think we do against Hearts. We saw them speed the game up because the crowd's frustrated naturally with sometimes these square passes. The Manny Fernandez one to Nico Raskin that kind of leads to the opener. But the reason Rangers are doing that is because they're trying to provoke the press and then obviously play through.
There was a moment like that on Sunday as well when Manny Fernandez has the ball and he's basically in the centre circle, and you've got 11 Livingston players behind the ball. They're 1-0 up at this point, and he's taking his time. He's waiting for the pass, and the away fans are losing it because they're like, "Why is he not moving the ball quicker? Why is he not finding that pass?"
But he can't do that because there's no free man, and if he passes it to like. If he loses a ball to Livingston, you're trying to commit a player to create the space, and I think that's an area where Celtic will maybe try and frustrate Rangers there, and the crowds. It was interesting after the Hearts game that Danny Rule almost made a wee point about the crowd saying they need to trust us to play that extra pass. I wonder if he'll speak about that in his press conference on or will have by this time it's out on Friday, because I think that's a factor too.
That is something that we've seen, like you mentioned, in the Livingston game as well, and that was, I guess, one of the things that concerned me about the approach at the weekend just past there. Was the second Suter mistake. I was going to say last, but I'm not sure there were only 2 mistakes. The second Suter mistake that ultimately leads to the second goal. He's got the ball. There's not a lot of options, but James Tavernier's here, and then it's a bad pass, and he miscontrols it and they go up the pitch. I feel like if that same situation played out against Hearts, the fullback is 15, 20 yards further forward. It's probably a centre mid that might have pulled out there. So there was, I don't know if it was the whole 2 strikers not there, therefore we bring people back. I'm not sure, but it sort of felt like a move back the way in terms of build-up that we've seen before, where you've got fullbacks maybe a little bit deeper. So what I would like to see is just go back to that. It won't negate mistakes, as we've seen with Fernandez and Nico Raskin, but I feel like it would serve us better.
Yep. So we'll get into our predicted lineups now and who we think is going to start this game. I've kind of sprung this on the two of you, who your starting 11 is going to be, but I'll talk through my starting 11 to begin with. I think was going to be Jack Butland in goals. I think we're a back 4 of 2 Romans, Emmanuel Fernandez, John Souttar and Dujon Sterling. I think he's going to play 3 in the midfield. I think it will be Tochi Chukwueze, Nico Raskin and Mohamed Diamande. I think that Mohamed Diamande being in there as that sort of player on the half turn, being able to break the press and work his way out of space, I think will be very useful. I think he'll also play Mikey Moore in the 10, and I think it'll be a front 2 of Yusuf Chirmite and Ryan Nadiri. Now, this could also transform itself into a box midfield for me when Mohamed Diamande moves alongside Mikey Moore, and then you can still have your overlapping fullbacks. Maybe Dujon not quite as much, but 2 Romans definitely overlapping on Mikey Moore. Is that too defensive? Tell me I'm wrong.
I think you're wrong, but
but let me tell you why politely.
Yeah, I think you're wrong. So who knows, Blair? Maybe you'll be right, but I just don't think. I don't think Rule will go to a new shape for a game because of the even within that shape. Then you've got one player deeper for how you press. Maybe if Celtic play a 3-5-2, Rule goes to something like that to try and flood the middle. However, he can't predict that before he plays his team. And then I think what he saw against Hearts was he wanted the 4 players. We covered it in our tactics video at the time. Chukwueze and Raskin drop deep with the 2 centre halves, the 2 wing backs provide the width. You then have, we'll maybe throw an image up of this just now. You have Moore and Skov Olsen inside as the number 10s. You have the 2 strikers, and a lot of that's about rotation and creating separation. Rule uses a principle called minimum width, which is where he doesn't want his wingers high and wide out by the touchline. He wants to play vertically, a very German football idea. So I think that is what you will see again, because rather than having Diamande as one of the 6 attacking players, I think he wants Moore and Skov Olsen in those positions. Because let's be honest, if you get the ball in the area that Skov Olsen did for the assist for Chirmite's goal, you want him out there instead of Diamande. So I agree with you. My team is the same team that Rangers played against Hearts. That's what I think it will be. I think it's harsh on Diamande. I'm one of Diamande's biggest advocates. I think he's excellent in these games. But going on what I think Rule will do, I think he'll want to go for 2 strikers. You'll want to still have that 4-4-2 shape. And Chukwueze and Raskin are the 2 players who he's favoured so far. And Raskin's definitely going to play, I think, because of his defensive recoveries, because he's really the first pick in midfield, even if his form's been up and down in recent weeks. And Chukwueze has been favoured over Diamande in part because of his physicality, I think, which is a different types to Diamande, who maybe covers ground quicker, but also because he's right-footed, and I think that suits when he drops into that left sort of left back spot as Romans pushes up. That suits his angles for playing forward.
Just before we get into Adam's team, let me pose this to you, Josh. Let me posit this to you. Rather, we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago when it was highlighted by yourself that Danny Rule is maybe adopting this sort of Hansi Flick approach of overloading the back line of his opponents. Mm-hmm. Do you think that will happen again against Celtic? If they adopt a back three, potentially a back five with the two fullbacks dropping in, will Rangers be brave enough to put 6 players against them?
I think that's what he wants to do, yeah. I think that the Hearts game...
Is that not overcommitting in an Old Firm game?
Depends what risk is, isn't it? So, but because it's also risky to pass the ball around, frustrate the crowd, and not put Celtic on the back foot. So I think if you look at how Rule wants to play, I'll give you an example. When we spoke about how he wants to press, sometimes I think he doesn't always want to win the ball back right away, and he doesn't go man for man at the top because you want to coax the opposition forward, have a little bit more support behind, and then have space to play into. You see that with the Mikey Moore goal and how Rangers press it at Parkhead, the position of Jeji Gisama. He wants to overload around the ball because obviously what you do on the ball is intrinsically linked to what you do off the ball. And overloading the last line is a very... I think it's a very Flick, who obviously he was the assistant for a few years, idea, because it's about attacking as quick as you can. And it's about, if Rangers do go and put 6 players in the Celtic's back 5 at points, then Celtic obviously have the decision, as Hearts did, do we put someone back or do we take that risk? It's a game of cat and mouse, I think, like any tactical approach. And I just think because they're at home, you might see them go for it a little bit more.
So, Adam, talk us through your starting 11. How do you think Danny Rule will line up against Celtic tomorrow?
So I think we should be going for it in most games at the minute, so it probably won't surprise you what I would be going for. I would have the same back four as you. I would be getting Dujon Sterling through this next 9 or 10 days, and then if he's injured again for a bit, then usually it's coming.
Yeah.
So I would push as much as we can, provided it's not going to be anything long term detrimental. Back four. Same as what you said, potentially a question mark at centre half, but again, it's not really going to be something that I would possibly look to change. John Souther, but it's not something that's going to happen, so it doesn't really seem much point in discussing it. And not anywhere near the same extent, but in midfield, I think Raskin probably is the other two are, I would say, playing better than Nico Raskin over the last 8 weeks in Diamandi's case and 3 or 4 in Chukwuani's, but I feel like in this game, Raskin and Chukwuani for me in the middle. Very harsh on Diamandi because I think he has been really, really good, but I think Chukwuani's ability to hoover up those second balls and eat up ground and win the ball back. I tweeted something the other week there. He's not played a huge amount of time, but winning the ball back after 10 seconds and 5 seconds, he's like second best in the league over the 5 or 6 games that he's played. That's huge. It's not just about we're going to have a lot of the ball. How much is he going to have to actually do if he wins the ball back in one moment in a game that is crucial? And I think he's better at that than the other two for sure. So I would have him in the team for that. Front four again, we're not sure on the injuries. Like we said, the manager has been quite coy. Diamandi didn't get off the bench at all last week. Was he one of the mystery players? We just assumed it was Dujon Sterling. We're not sure. All that sort of factors into my thinking. But the front four for me, Mikey Moore on one side, Scov Olsen on the other, as the 2 10s, and then Nadiri and Chermiti. I think that is huge, and I think that four needs to play consistently now to get the best out of all 4 of them, really. There's this terminology that I keep talking about. I mentioned it on Heart and Hand the other day. It's the Jesse Marsh. Probably a lot of eye rolling at that, but Jesse Marsh counter pressing.
Josh has Jesse Marsh posters up on his wall. It's all right.
I can imagine counter pressing and Gegen pressing. Just when you were talking about Hansi Flick, he's got this sort of methodology, this acronym SARD. 3 of the words are German that I'm absolutely not going to pronounce, but it's about sort of when you sprint, how you sprint, the intensity that you sprint is the S, then the A translates to all together, and it's like has to be a ball orientated press. It can't be Old Firm games in the past where we've had Dessers and Cantwell just running up to
Yeah.
press, and then there's
Yeah.
so much in behind. So having that 4 as a unit that goes,
They need to hunt in packs,
I think, is huge.
to use a Danny Rohlism.
And when you go, you have to go with commitment to win
Yeah.
the ball. Ryan Nadiri is incredible at that from what I've seen. You go and you commit and you try and win the ball. If you don't, you've got that second wave behind you, which is the fourth acronym there. The midfielders pushing up to support, but also Scov Olsen and Mikey Moore. If you go and look at their positioning in the Hearts game, and to Romans and Duzer and Selin, it effectively becomes a 4 or 6 on the last line. Having that second wave there, and I think those two players, and Moore and Scov Olsen, are huge at that. They're very intelligent. They pick up spaces. They do have a threat from long distance. They are the creative players, or they should be the creative players in the team. Having those two positioned to deal with that counter press, second wave, stopping counter attacks coming as well, was, I think, really, really important against Hearts, and I think will be important here as well. You've got Chermiti for first contact. You've got Nadiri to go and press. If they get through Nadiri, you've got that second wave coming to try and win the ball back high. I think that's key to the gegenpressing German philosophy anyway. But having watched those players now, I think that's something that we need to commit to. I'm talking about committing all in on sprints here. I think we need to commit to that setup and that shape and that style and go with those players. So yeah, that's my. I think I named 11 there.
Yep.
I got a bit distracted.
I think you two actually agree on the same team, and the same team that played against Hearts. Last point before we finish up for this afternoon.
Yes.
I've obviously taken Andreas Scov Olsen out my side. I was pretty critical of him after the Livingston game. He might have picked up an injury. I know a few people on the post-match show picked up on me saying that him getting hooked at half-time was probably a fair move for Danny Rowe to make. I wouldn't start him against Celtic. The reasons I've outlined, I think Diamande, if he drops it in at 3, it gives you more control in the middle of the park. I know everyone is approaching this game with a lot of optimism, but Old Firm games very rarely follow the script.
True.
And I always think it's better to have a little bit more control in these games, a little bit extra bodies where you need them, because the last thing you want is Benjamin Nygren, who's probably going to be the danger man for Celtic. You don't want to give him the space to operate in behind. And I fear as though that may happen if Rangers go with a sort of fullbacks up high, if they get through that, as you spoke about, Chermiti, Nadiri, that line of 4, all of a sudden you're one pass and then you've got Nygren potentially in a lot of space. So I would quite like someone else in there just to kind of combat that a little bit. So for me, Scov Olsen is the guy that misses out, potentially coming in off the bench. Adam, am I being too harsh on Scov Olsen because his performances thus far to me have not warranted him starting in this game?
Probably not. No. I think it's about output. I go back to that moment, and I don't think we can really underestimate that moment against Hearts, where he puts that ball in.
It's an excellent cross. Yeah, fair play.
Not sure anybody can do it. He for me, Scov Olsen is signed to do those things. Am I expecting a goal or two more in terms of contribution? For sure. Absolutely. He is getting up to speed. We know all of that. We don't really have time for that. It is a bit of an excuse. I understand your point, for sure. I definitely do. And sometimes I would probably agree with it. But I just think, maybe it's just me, but I think you have to commit and sometimes overcommit to win titles. And if you have to scale it back within a game, then you scale it back. I think I spoke about how there wasn't a comparison with the Old Firm game at New Year, but I think that's probably a good example of it. Rangers committed, it did not go to plan, and then they readjusted based on the game, and they did what they have to do. Sort of falls to the piece I was mentioning about potentially it being a slightly cautious lineup at last weekend, although it did not play out that way. I just feel like it's easier to pare something back than it is to go and add things on in the heat of an Old Firm. Imagine you get to half time and you're 2-0 down, for example, because you've been a little bit too conservative. And we've seen how the manager sometimes, some of the subs at half time or even in 50, 60 minutes, you're like, where have we got that from? It's almost like they're not used to that reactiveness of it. So that's where I come from. I think it's better to go all out, and worst case, hopefully you would still be in the game and you can readjust. But the benefits are there too.
Josh, tell me why Scov Olsen should start this game.
He's hardly. I honestly think we spoke about it in the morning briefing on Thursday. See, if we're having this conversation in 2 weeks and he's had 2 ineffectual games against Celtic, fair enough. Then that's when I think you say, oh, it's a bit of a worry. We should have done more and give him a bit of time. I think 7 out of 10 against Hearts. Don't think he was great at all against Livingston. Don't think he was alone. Fine from the bench against Kilmarnock. fine in the game over Queen's Park relative to the opposition. First 2 games against Hibs and Dundee, very rusty, hasn't played much football. These are the games he's been signed for. This is the... And even if he doesn't have a 9 out of 10 game, I still think that he can play that cross and have that moment. So I think you play him by... Rangers have been guilty of chopping and changing too much this season. Mm-hmm. Sometimes through no fault of their own, sometimes by their own decision. I'd like to see that front four stay together and over these next 2 games. And if he doesn't do well with the next 2 games, then I think that's when you start to have a conversation about concern.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, I'll spare us the indignity of asking for score predictions because that will inevitably end horribly. But that is what we think. Looking ahead to tomorrow's massive Old Firm derby in the league. Let us know what you think in the comments. Let us know your score predictions. Let us know who you think should start the game. And of course, keep it across the Rangers Review for all the coverage of tomorrow's match. We'll be there team-handed, I believe the phrase is, Josh. We will be covering it from every angle. But for now, from me, Josh and Adam on the Saturday show, thanks for watching and thanks for listening.